Hello and welcome back to Lorehammer. Tonight, we're on the Path of the Podcaster. I'm your host, Mark, and joining me, the Path of the Podcaster himself, Nearseer Christofferson. Welcome.
Always a pleasure. In a way, we're all outcasts on this fine show.
Yeah, some more outcast than the other, for sure. I feel outcast on an island at times while you guys live in a city next to each other, but hey, such is life.
Indeed, and this is Jordan. Hey, yo.
Jordan, welcome. What are you drinking tonight?
Oh, we got a bit of, let's see here.
He's mixing drinks.
You don't have to tell everyone everything.
For Drunk Hammer tonight, we got some Weller original wheated bourbon.
Mm-hmm. For every Patreon dollar that we get during this show, Jordan will be shooting a shot. So definitely go check out the Patreon, and we'll see how blasted we can get them.
Every dollar?
Every dollar is a shot, Jordan. I've already donated $100 to this show, which directly goes back to me.
I want to see some liver poisoning.
Today we're doing Path of the Outcast. So we're doing an Eldar episode, but before we get to that, let's just do a little housekeeping. I'm not going to try to sell you t-shirts, but you can go buy them on your own accord. Go to Red Circle, forget which one. Red Bubble, maybe. Red Circle, hard to say.
Red Bubble.
There's links in the description below. Yeah. But the one thing I do want to tell you guys about beyond buying t-shirts off me is I was invited on a YouTube channel the other day, and we had a lot of fun. The channel was called The Ever Prince of Mankind. And the episode that we did together was Founding of a Chapter. And he came up with like this 62-page document of founding a Space Marine chapter. It was wild. It's one of those times where like I get invited on and then they send me the page. Like I agree to do it. And then they send me the notes. I'm like opening it up like, oh, fuck, we're going to be here all day. But it was a lot of fun, man. It was this random chapter generator, much like how 1D or Fantasy Flight Games had their chapter generators. So we were rolling through that and coming up with a bunch of cool stuff. And I came up with the Astral Reavers chapter. So definitely go check out the Ever Prince of Mankind on YouTube. And it was a lot of fun. Had a great time with them.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. And if you guys want to help support the show, join the Imperial Tide. The Imperium needs you. We need you. You can get ad-free versions of the show for only $2.50 and video versions and see our beautiful faces for $5. $2.50. I mean, that is cheaper than your daily Monster Energy drink. So definitely consider supporting the show that way.
And that's 2.5 shots for Jordan, technically, if you
2.5 shots, yes. And 5 shots if you go for the video version. So $5, get Jordan some alcohol poisoning right away.
And if you're feeling real ambitious and you want to plaster me, you can do that. Join the Patreon, and as well as getting me super drunk, you can also get access to the live chat room during the show, and you can be the calling guest at the end of the show as well. So that's always fun.
Yeah, we've had some great call-ins recently. Would love to hear some other voices. Hey, I wonder, listeners, what time is a good time to stream? Maybe shoot me a message and maybe I'll set up a time directly in your time zone to stream. I know a lot of people in Europe have been begging me to start up a Europe version of Lorehammer for all you guys. So, maybe for every $4, I'll set up another one of those. So we'll get Jordan drunk and me drunk on Warhammer.
Excellent.
All right. So Eldar episode. Eldar are always interesting, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive on the Path of the Outcast. The Path of the Outcast is taken on by loners and rogues and bandits and people who don't quite fall into the typical craft world mindset.
Right.
Yeah, they don't like following the rules for sure, but they're not like evil like Drakari, although they could be that way, but that is technically the path of damnation, the Drakari path. But so today we're going to talk about the Path of the Outcast, but before we do that, let's just talk a little bit about the path of the Asuryani. So just the whole kind of philosophy of the path system, and we'll talk about getting lost on the path real quick and just give you some context before we talk about the Outcast path. The Path of the Asuryani, once known as the Eldar Path or the Aeldari, is a rigorous system of discipline designed to protect the Eldari from the soul-devouring clutches of Slaanesh. These structured codes channel the Aeldari's immense emotional intensity, safeguarding them from self-destructive excesses that lead them to the fall from their once great empire. Unified by philosophy and self-mastery, the paths form a psychic and physical bulwark, preserving the remnants of their ancient grandeur while shielding them from the insatiable hunger of she who thirsts. Each path represents a focused discipline, whether as a warrior, artisan, explorer, technician, or requiring complete dedication until mastery is achieved. Over their long lives, Asuryani may follow many paths, accumulating a vast arsenal of skills while maintaining the balance necessary for their survival. Yet this process is fraught with danger. The intense focus required can entrap the unwary Aeldari, leaving them lost upon a path. Consumed by a singular purpose, this tragic fate serves as a constant reminder of the fragility of even the most disciplined of minds. The Asuryani paths are as varied as their society, encompassing both highly defined roles and more flexible vocations. While some, like the warriors and bone singers, are steeped in tradition and strict guidance, others, such as technicians or traders, offer greater freedom and rely on the individual's inner strength. Regardless of their path, all Asuryani contribute to the craftworld's defense, uniting as guardians when needed to protect their people and legacy from the ever-present threat of annihilation. Yeah, the pass system was created basically after Slaanesh was born as a way to tame their indulgences, as a way to safeguard their race from going too far once again. They focus in on one thing, which in and of itself is kind of excessive, but somehow it works. Uh, no, I'm only going to be a warrior. No art for me, only war. But in so doing this, they safeguard their soul from being devoured, and they're able to explore many different paths throughout their lifetime and explore many different lives, essentially.
Yeah, but they can only ever do any one path at any one time. So like you said, you're all in when you're a craftsman, you're all in as being a craftsman. You could do that because Eldar live forever, right? You could spend hundreds of years as a craftsman honing your skill, developing as a I was going to say as a person, but Eldar aren't really people, are they? But then you get kind of tired of it and you're like, okay, I'm going to try something different. So then you switch paths and you try the path of a warrior or different, maybe if you have really good psychic potential, you become a farseer. But then if you become all consumed by a path, and that's what getting lost on the path is, and that's all you'll ever be. You're kind of like forever stuck to that one purpose, right?
Yeah, I definitely have gotten lost on the path of the podcaster for sure. I've been all consumed by it.
Claimed all our souls.
Yeah, but
quick question about it. Like, how much choice do they get in choosing their path? Like, do they have a choice, or is it sort of predetermined for them?
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I would imagine that there is a lot of flexibility, but also there are some cases like the Farseers, who kind of lead the craft world. Like that one, you're not just going on that one. The whole craft world can't go on that one. And maybe during times of peace and prosperity, lots of them can choose their path specifically. But maybe certain craft worlds that are like in times of peril, they're not letting as many people go on the path of the artisan, Maybe they're trying to push people a little to other directions and stuff. But I think overall, the way I kind of see it is definitely, you choose what's kind of calling to you. Because it's a way to kind of temper your being, your person. So if you are being forced down one path, but you're really feeling the call of the other path, like that's not really the whole point. Is to temper yourself and to train and to master something and to kind of almost indulge on this path without getting lost to Slaanesh.
Yeah, and in a way, like it's a way of like allowing yourself to feel things, right? So like, let's say you're really passionate about music, right? It's a way to like, okay, I'm going all in on music. I can feel everything through music. I can do everything with music. But like Mark said, that's what safeguards you from like, okay, but you're getting like crazy with music. You start doing lots of drugs and like become a rock god, and then all these other distractions take over, and eventually you're like a hedonist, right? So it's a very disciplined. It's almost like a disciplined I wouldn't say hedonism, because it is, even within the path, like it's a lot more disciplined. But yeah, it essentially.
I think it's kind of cool because with like other races, there isn't really that choice. I know, like once you choose your path, like you're stuck with it, but at least you get sort of a choice. Like if you're an Astartes, you're born that way. You do not have a choice, right? Like
Yeah,
you're technically
you were abducted as a 12-year-old boy, then indoctrinated into this crazy cult that worships this corpse god. Yeah, not necessarily a choice. The other thing to note about the Eldar is they have like a perfect society, let's say, or damn near close to it, where they don't have to work to survive anymore. They have machines that can do all their menial labor and stuff. So you don't necessarily need these like factory workers that are just like, somebody has to do the shit work. Well, they got robots and constructs to do that for them. So, you can really definitely focus in
Yeah,
then.
it's very much like art based, and that's why it's like artisan, right? Like even people who are building things are doing it with like that artistic flair. It's more passion projects, and that's why I don't think that necessarily people get forced into anything, because technically that's what guardians are. So like, let's see, if your craft world is very artistic and everyone's doing their own like, fancy non-combat role, if you do come under threat, then everyone pretty much does get gang pressed into becoming a guardian in that moment, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're not so strict that, yeah, you're an artist, but you can still hold a gun, and because you're an Eldar, you can still aim and shoot pretty good. And if you maybe used to be, one of the warrior paths, like in a previous life, you would have some combat proficiency,
Yeah.
having lived 100,000 years.
Yeah, that's pretty long for an Eldar, but I get what you're saying. But yeah, you
Yeah.
could definitely have mastered a couple paths before. Like, yeah, maybe after you went down the path of the warrior, you're like, I have now experienced the horrors of the galaxy. I need to temper myself and go down the path of the botanist and just hang out with trees and grow. Instead of destroy, I need to grow.
Yeah. But again, if your craft world comes under threat, you're always capable of picking up a rifle, right?
Yeah.
And then you just join the Guardians.
Yeah.
And then once the immediate threat is extinguished, then you can go back to whatever it is you do. Mostly just die if you're fighting Space Marines, but
Very nice. Did you ever watch any of the Warhammer Plus TV stuff?
No.
They had a great. It was an Eldar one. I forget what chapter they were fighting. I watched this so long ago, but it was very cool. Just watching them kind of do their Eldar thing and following the path, and they had some good kind of examples of people getting lost and all that kind of stuff. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go down a couple of these paths. Path of Awakening. The Path of Awakening teaches an Eldari to observe their environment with extraordinary focus and perception, honing their ability to notice the seemingly insignificant. It is often pursued before the Path of the Artisan, as it emphasizes looking outward to understand the world. What kind of like technical role would that be? Because it's like a precursor to becoming an artisan. So like you're obviously hyper focused, hyper vigilant. You're very obviously astute to your environment.
Yeah, maybe it's just like learning to see things for what they are or what they could be, seeing things on that deeper level, like that understanding, like, yeah, I know what a tree is, but like now I need to like see how it really works. Like, okay, so the leaves are needed for growth, and like you really look at every aspect of it to get the full picture of how everything works. Yeah.
Cool. All right. The Path of the Artisan. So that last one was a precursor. So this path can channel creative expression through disciplines like music, poetry, or sculpture, with countless sub-specializations and artistic schools shaping in Aeldari's craft. It allows individuals to achieve profound spiritual fulfillment by mastering their chosen medium.
Making all types of fun things.
The path, like a lot of these are very self-explanatory, right? You have the Path of Botanist, as Mark mentioned, they deal with a lot of plants and things. Path of Command, you are a military strategist. Do they have, I guess the Farseers are kind of their peacetime leaders, eh?
Yeah, peacetime, wartime, but yeah, definitely
Path of Command is more like a general, like a military
Yeah,
strategist. Yeah. And then you have Path of Damnation, as Mark mentioned, is a lot of if you become a Dark Eldar, if your soul has been tainted by Slaanesh, Slaanesh is constantly feeding off your soul, so you become kind of like a vampire.
Yeah.
Essentially. And you have to constantly find souls to give to Slaanesh in place of your soul.
Yeah, that is interesting too, that like craftworlders can go down the path of damnation. It's not like there's this distinct split 10,000 years ago at the birth of Slaanesh or whatever, and then since that split, that's all it can be. There can be new dark elder that pop up every year of just craftworlders who kind of fell on this path of damnation. So
yeah, which is cool because that could be a cool story of like you used to be a very disciplined Eldar and then you, for one reason or another, fall to the Dark Eldar ways.
Purge asks in the comments, is there an exotic dancer path?
Yeah, it's under the Path of the Artisan.
yeah.
All Eldar dance is erotic dance.
Exotic, not erotic.
It could be both. It's both. Path of the Dreamer is a meditative path and involves controlling, navigating dreamscapes, allowing the dreamer to explore their inner psyche, like a psychologist or a counselor. Experienced dreamers, known as dream watchers, ensure their peers do not succumb to the dream's entrancing allure. Do you know, Mark, anything more about that? Is there something about Eldar and their dreams? Can they be locked into dreams or something?
You almost have like the Farseers, that when they are Farseers for so long, they have that like crystallized state. Where they're almost in this like eternal dream, so you could communicate with them potentially. And also there's a little bit of crossover with like wraith units, the path of the dead, who your ancestors, when they die, they get put in soul stones and then put into the infinity circuit, and then on times of great need you can call your ancestors out and put them into wraith constructs. But like this being stuck in the infinity circuit is like being stuck in this weird dream, so maybe you can kind of tap into that a little bit.
Yeah, it's like a twilight state.
Yeah. Maybe prepare yourself for that.
Yeah. The Path of Grief. This path trains Aeldari to channel their immense emotional capacity into structured mourning for the dead at remembrance, services, and funerals. By undertaking this path, they prevent their grief from spiraling into destructive excess that could attract Slaanesh. So that's interesting. That's back in the day, like ancient Greece, people would hire, especially like very wealthy people, would hire professional mourners. So you'd have like, they would cry for you and like scream and rend their clothes and like really play up like how much of your death has been an impact on the society. A lot of cultures actually have stuff similar to that, which is kind of cool that they have this. And with Eldar, it makes sense because Eldar are so psychic and they're so, their emotions are so powerful that, yeah, like even for us humans, like really intense periods of grief can be completely destructive, right? So it makes sense that the Eldar would turn it into a discipline. And I wonder if all other Eldar who aren't really on this path might try to shut off their emotions, and something really tragic happens, they kind of find a way to just like cut themselves off from it until they allow themselves on this path of grief. And again, like I said, all these paths don't have to be forever. And you're dealing with like a species that's very long lived. So a short time to them could be a long time to us, but none of them necessarily have to be like you're always on the path of grief. You could, for a time, like something terrible happened to you or your Eldar family, then you go down this path of grief for a time until you feel like you're in a better place.
Yeah, and this one, even depending on like it'd be kind of interesting for some craft worlds, like you have a day of the path of grief where everyone collectively goes on this path together for just one day, and acknowledge all the death that's happened in the craft world, and then after that they kind of shut this path down and it's like back to work. Very like Latin American kind of culture with how they do like their Day of the Dead and pass that on. That's the vibe I'm going for.
I get what you're saying. I wouldn't quite equate the two, but there is a similar idea behind it, I would say.
Yeah, like Latin American is way more celebratory.
Yeah, it's a lot
like
happier.
Grieving. Yeah.
And it's meant to be like reconnecting with, it's more like engaging with your infinity circuit, really, more than anything. But But
I'll take your half Hispanic ass for this
you live there,
revelation
but
here.
I
Yeah.
am there. So, but yeah, in any case, there are individuals I'd imagine that are also 24/7 on this path of grief, and they mourn on everyone's behalf.
Yeah.
They hear your stories and they like grieve because you can't. They'll grieve for you. So
Yeah.
there's a path of the healer, dedicating themselves to restoring life, health through medicine, surgery, and biomedical research. They find spiritual fulfillment in preserving the living and mending the broken. And that I would imagine is both psychic and physical healing. Hey,
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
yeah,
Well, even emotional healing as well.
yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like psychic, like
Oh,
your being as a person, not just using psychic powers, but like psychology.
yeah, yeah.
Eldar therapy.
Yeah, they need it.
So you birthed the chaos god of excess. How does that make you feel?
You would never run out of clients. Path of the Mariner. This path involves serving aboard craftworld fleets as crew or officers, often pursued by those seeking inner peace or adventure. Mariners navigate the stars and maintain the harmony of their immense vessels, essential to their people's survival. So that's a lot more practical. All the other ones we've had are kind of like, other than for the healer one, I guess, the other ones are very like artistic. But Path of the Mariner seems very practical, like you're serving a function on a ship.
Yeah. But also it serves that kind of like, okay, so what are some emotions that people kind of have? Some people have wanderlust where they just need to go wander and explore and they can't stop and they need that adventure in their life. And if they're sitting still, they feel like, they got the fucking cocaine itch if they're not moving and doing things.
They got the jitters, yeah.
They got the jitters. Yeah, so this is a good path for them to kind of really be able to explore that and kind of traverse the stars.
Get it out of their system. Yeah.
Yeah.
Path of the Outcast, which we're going to deep dive in a little more here, is a rejection of the structured Aeldari paths. This path is pursued by those seeking freedom, often becoming rangers, corsairs, or even pathfinders. Without the path's protections, outcasts risk self-destruction or falling to the path of damnation. So like you said earlier, Mark, like this path is really on the edge of like starting to be like, okay, you're almost rejecting the entire path idea altogether. And this is almost like other Eldar saying this about you rather than you're like, I'm going to go on the path of the outcasts. Is more like, yeah, this path thing isn't really working out for me.
Yeah, I think they describe it as an actual like unofficial path. Like this and the path of damnation are like unofficial. Like, yeah, we kind of know what they are, but they're not. Like you said, you don't actually really choose to go on them.
Yeah, and it's more so people who use the path system as what they call you. You're the outcast, right?
Yeah.
It's not like I've decided I'm going to become an outcast today.
Good.
Path of the Scholar, pretty self-explanatory, mastering and sharing academic knowledge in fields such as science, archaeology, or in teaching. This path preserves the intellectual heritage of the Eldari and ensures its transmission to future generations. Path of the Seer, the psychic path allows an Eldari to wield incredible mental power, guiding their people as farseers, spirit seers, or warlocks. It is the most perilous path, as losing oneself within it leads to becoming part of the craft world itself as a crystal seer. And I believe we did an episode on farseers a while back. So go back and listen to that if you want more details on like that thing Mark was talking about where you crystallize. Path of Service. This path involves performing essential tasks like cooking, crafting, or manual labor to sustain the craft world's community. By dedicating themselves to service, Eldari find fulfillment and ensure their society thrives.
Yeah, so we'll jump back to Path of the Seer. That's episode 58 if you're interested in listening to that one. And yeah, you can get a lot of that. We've done a lot of the paths before, a lot of the big ones, like we've done Path of the Warrior and stuff. But now jump into Path of Service. This one's interesting because as I was saying earlier this episode, like they have machines and robotics that can take care of all of the basic living operations that need to be done. So you kind of like, why do you need this path of service if you like, why do you need a cook if you have cooks for you? But for those of you who've kind of grown up in church spheres, you've probably heard of like the 5 love languages or whatever. Service is one of them. It's a one way that people can show love and affection and emotion for each other. So even though they don't need somebody to cook for them, it's a great way to still kind of experience that emotion and that giving of yourself to somebody else, even though it's not necessary.
Yeah. I almost picture it as not quite like as charity work, but like, yeah, you don't work in a soup kitchen because you're, a 5-star chef. You work in a soup kitchen because you want to help other people. And it's that desire to act and serve society that drives these people to do manual labor and do cooking and do, some of the menial tasks. Cooking is interesting though, because if you like, again, in real life, if you're like a 5-star chef, like that's actually an artistic discipline, right? Like, sure, any fry cook can throw something in a microwave, but you have like the two sides of it of like, it's a task that we all have to do to survive. And, it's like labor, or
Yeah,
like you can take the artistic route and be like, yeah, this Eldar has like totally focused on honing his skill as a chef
yeah.
and is going to make the most delicious meal you've ever tasted in your life.
It's a weird pastime I have, but to watch professional tradesmen do something in their trade, and you just watch their hands and you watch how quickly they can do motions, whether it's a plumber cutting a pipe and gluing and doing whatever kind of motions they're doing, but it's this mastery of something. And yeah, any of these paths, like there's the basic form, like, yeah, like you said, you're doing stuff in the soup kitchen, not really making a great food, but then you could take it to that mastery that everyone's trying to aim for when they go on the paths in the first place.
Yeah. I think a lot of like Japanese culture where they like really emphasize like putting your all into everything.
Yeah,
And it's very much like, even the little things require your utmost attention and mastery over that area. If it's something as simple as making your bed, you need to
yeah,
master it.
There is also like a thing about, I don't know, this might be a little into conjecture, but if a lot of the tasks of the society are already taken up by automation and machines and robots, you're going to have like a lot of just idle hands. So like you just need things for people to do.
That's how pleasure cults start, Jordan.
that is how pleasure cults start.
Yeah. You there, it's like, just, okay, if you can't pick something here, do a path of service, everyone can do that, right? So
Yeah, and at least then you're not getting into trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If nothing else. Path of shaping, a subset of the path of the artisan. This path is for bone singers who psychically mold and repair wraith bone, the lifeblood of Aeldari architecture and technology. It blends artistry, engineering, and psychic talent into a single discipline. We talked a bit about wraithbone on another previous episode too, didn't you? Probably a few episodes, but probably one of the earlier Eldar episodes. Like wraithbone is like psychic energy made solid, and it has a lot of properties, and is essentially the material that they build everything from like buildings and starships to weapons and cooking utensils out of. Everything is built out of wraithbone, and it's like psychically attuned material.
Yeah. It's solidified warp energy is the way they kind of typically describe it. So yeah, you can then mold it and craft it and kind of pour your own like psychic essence into it to make it like really personal and like more meaningful. And yeah.
So it's like, as a material, it's a substance that anyone can work with, but bone singers especially are like, that is what they do. They call them bone singers, and they use kind of like music or whatever to psychically shape it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just keep bringing this stuff up because I'm always cognizant of maybe this is someone's first time listening to an episode, and like, what the heck, you just spouted a bunch of different terms that like I have no reference for. So
Pro tip: don't jump into 128th. Start at number 1.
Start at 1 and then work from there.
Pro tip.
Right. Path of the Thought Talker. This path trains telepathic Aeldari to act as interpreters and ambassadors, communicating directly through conceptual language. Thought talkers bridge cultural divides, enabling understanding between Aeldari and other species. So these guys would be, like ambassadors, and like, and they would communicate with other species then?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. These would be like the negotiators and stuff for sure.
Yeah. I guess you don't always need, like, even though the Eldar definitely think they're better than everyone, it doesn't mean there aren't instances where they wouldn't speak with other beings, right? Even if they do consider you less.
Yeah, and like, there's so many races. Like, they look down on humans, but do they look down on some of them, like
Yes.
Jakaro? Yes, they do. Do they look down on the actual space monkeys?
The answer is yes. Everyone who is not an Eldar is lesser than an Eldar. But there are times when they would need to communicate. They don't always necessarily, they're not like the Imperium. They don't shoot on sight, right? If they can talk their way out of a situation, or if their Farseers think that's the best course of action, then that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
So
we got to beat down the chat again with the horny stick. Yeah.
Oh my God.
This is not a Tau episode, so you're not allowed.
It's whenever it's me and Jordan that's on. We do something to the audience. We unlock something in there.
Join that $5 video Patreon to see Jordan rubbing his shirtless nips here, and that's what's doing it to the chat, no doubt. Hey, pipe down in their chat room. Don't make me get that stick.
All right. Last and probably most popular of all, well, popular for mainstream. I don't know how popular any of these are if you were to divide them up by the numbers, but the Path of the Warrior. This path transforms Aeldari into aspect warriors, embodying the battle's aspects of Khaine and combat roles like Howling Banshees or Dark Reapers. Warriors who lose themselves on this path become exarchs, eternally devoted to war.
Yeah, very cool. So that's a good little overview of the path. And there are more paths than that. And it'd be interesting to see even what people could come up with for their own path. Like if you're doing your own personalized craft world, maybe you come up with a very unique path that they alone have that really, I'm not even sure what you could come up with, but I'm sure you could come up with something.
Yeah. And some of these paths also have sub paths that kind of branch off from them, right? Like especially the warrior one. Okay, you're on the warrior path, but then you have all these different aspect warriors that you can go down. Or like we mentioned, the path of service could take so many different forms. Right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Lost on the path. For the Aeldari, becoming lost on the path is a tragic fate where an individual becomes so consumed by the discipline they once chose to master that they cannot move beyond it. The paths are designed to channel the Aeldari's intense emotions into structured pursuits, safeguarding their souls from ruin. Yet some become enraptured by their path's purpose, allowing it to define their very existence. These souls are unable to tread a new path, their identity consumed by their singular focus, leaving them revered for their mastery, yet pity for their inability to evolve. Yeah, that could be like maddening. You become like so obsessed with one thing. The signs of being lost differ by path. Warriors who lose themselves may become exarchs, eternal embodiments of battle and vengeance, bound to their aspect shrines. Artisans might endlessly create works of unmatched beauty while losing all connection to the world. For seers, it can mean becoming a farseer, entrapped by the endless labyrinth of psychic visions. In all cases, their obsession renders them unable to function beyond their chosen path, transforming them into both icons of devotion and symbols of the peril inherent in their society's way of life. The fate of the lost underscores the delicate balance the Aeldari must maintain. While the paths offer salvation from their destructive impulses, they also hold the potential to become a trap. Rarely, a lost soul may be freed through trauma or intervention, but such cases are fraught with risk and uncertainty. For most, their community honors their dedication while mourning the broader potential they once had held. These lost individuals serve as poignant reminders of the sacrifices required to navigate the Aeldari's perilous emotions, embodying both the triumphs and tragedies of their race.
Yeah, so any OCD Eldar out there get lost on these paths where they just have to master it, but they do one small error. They're pouring a cup of water, but they blink while pouring. Like, that was not mastery. And they just get lost in the littlest of things sometimes where they can't dig themselves out anymore.
Yeah, it's like a life-consuming obsession, right? To be all you eat, think, and breathe.
Do you think like their psychic ability could affect them in some way, like psychologically on their paths to be that way?
I think that's what's inherent is like, I think because they're so psychic and because they're so like they experience things so much more powerfully, that is exactly why they're so prone
Yeah.
to obsessing. And that's why when they go also off the rails is why they go off the rails so crazy, is all for the same reason, right? They're a fragile instrument, and anything that becomes too overwhelming just completely takes over.
Yeah. There would be like I don't know if they had the same chemicals of like dopamine and stuff that we would have, but maybe they probably would have something similar where, you know, they get that, so they feel everything so much more, and that includes these like hits, these rushes that they need to feel. So then if they do like get off it, then it's like a super crash, you know, if they're all of a sudden get off these dopamine hits and then they're like super flatlined.
Yeah, like I picture like almost like you said, Mark, instead of dopamine, they have like heroin in their veins, right? And they get that heroin hit
Sure.
whenever they're doing the thing they're doing. And that's why like their highs are so much higher and their lows are so much lower, because everything is just so much more amplified to them. So yeah, like they're getting a heroin hit whenever they're mastering combat or mastering the path of service. Like they're constantly riding that high, and then yeah, it becomes all consuming. Or alternatively, they're able to like discipline themselves.
You learn to master it.
Yeah, enough that you can get off the path, or it completely consumes you, and that's all you can do forever now.
Yeah. I wonder, like, you know, I don't imagine it's pretty often that Eldar do get lost on the path. Like, my only reason for saying that is just, you know, if you look at Eldar warriors and stuff, you have 9 warriors and then you have 1 exarch. So only 1 has been lost on that path, you know. Um, and like you just couldn't have a society that like if the majority of people, even like a lot, the mass of them or whatever, 25% of them get lost on the path, it just wouldn't seem like it works. So I think getting lost is still a pretty rare thing to happen, but it does happen.
Yeah, and I would imagine too, like it's like real life, right? Like, you know, you have like a handful of people that are good enough at any sport to be professionals, right? Just a small group of people, and that's kind of like your people that are so obsessed, or like all they do is eat, sleep, and drink basketball, or eat, sleep, and drink hockey, right? And they become such pros at it. But proportionally to the whole population, even if I love hockey and I'm obsessed with hockey, I'm never going to be like an NHL player, right?
Yeah,
So I'm not necessarily lost on that path because I can do other things.
I
Whereas like
see. Yeah,
these
yeah,
these pros is like it's all they do and all they can do and all they wake up doing, and but proportionally to the population. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's a small
Interesting.
group. But we don't know. They don't necessarily give us hard numbers, which is probably for the better. I hate when
Yeah,
40K gives us hard numbers.
yeah. All right. So now we got some context of how the pass system kind of operates. Do we all feel comfortable with that? How about the chat? Have you guys understood?
Grimaldus says the path of the sleeper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Purge wants to go down the path of degeneracy, so that's always nice.
That's the path of damnation, sir.
Yeah, I think they're all on the path of the virgin personally, but whatever.
One more quick point. Part of the whole path system is also supposed to be discipline. So you're supposed to be able to master that and master yourself to not get lost on the path. So that's the other kind of balancing factor. So even if you're prone to get lost on the path, the whole idea of it is self-discipline. And that's what prevents you too from going too crazy with it, or supposed to in theory.
Now, I remember back in the day having a spicy argument with a certain redhead about getting lost on the path and then getting unlost on the path. And I remember being adamant, like, no, the whole point of the path is you're lost on it. You're not getting off of it. You're never getting off of it. Once you're lost, you are lost on it. And he seemed to have other ideas. Do you guys think once you're lost on a path, like maybe after 5,000 years you finally get it out of your system and people thought you were lost, and then all of a sudden you weren't?
Snap out
Yeah.
of it. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's pretty evidently explicitly said that you can come back, but it's rare and typically is done at risk to the person and risk like through something traumatic. So let's say you're on the path of the artisan and like maybe all your creations get completely destroyed, or something that like totally devastates you as an artist. Like your whole being is completely rewritten by whatever happened. I don't know. I hate to say I'm an artist. I am an artist, but something that like challenges you. Everyone has a crisis where they discover something. Let's say you no longer believe in the religion you believe in, or something like changes in your life dramatically that totally shakes you to your core, and you don't even know who you are anymore. If people have experienced that, I think something like that needs to happen to an Eldar to shake them out of it.
But I don't know if that would happen to someone who's lost on the path. Like if they're in the technical position of being lost on the path, I'm not sure they would have an existential crisis. Like I could see you having that existential crisis if you're just on the path and you're like a fair ways in, and then all of a sudden,
no, like, okay, the path of the Warhammer painter, let's say, you're completely consumed. That's all you're doing is like doing Warhammer, and then you realize it's been 40 years of playing Warhammer, and you've only painted really like 5 guys that you obsess over, and you have piles and piles of gray plastic in your closet.
God, this is a very personal story to you, eh, Christian?
I've wasted my life collecting and building and never actually painting any of it. It's so life altering that you just want to quit Warhammer altogether and sell all your stuff.
Okay.
we're supposed to be talking about the Eldar here. Okay.
I am an Eldar. I'm a Nearseer.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like
Sure.
it has to be
something so devastating, so like, yeah, your whole craft world dies and you're on the path of the warrior, and it's your fault that they all died, and you're like, that shook me out of it, and now I'm on the path of the outcast.
Or it could cause you to double down and be like, now I'm on the path of vengeance forever.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it has to be something like excessive and crazy to snap you out of it. I like to leave doors open, and maybe potentially, like you said, Mark, 5,000, 10,000 years later, you kind of maybe have a self-realization. Like you put that last, you're a sculptor, and you hit that last kind of chisel into your piece, and you're like, okay, it's finally finished. I'm done. And you can like take a deep breath and walk away from all of it.
And you never speak of it again. None of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to leave that door open. I don't think it's explicitly said anywhere that you could just naturally come off a path. I think, like I said, more often than not, it's something traumatic, and it's something that messes you up too, potentially.
Yeah. Grimaldus says, "Path of the Never Painter, cut deep." LOL. So.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of you out there.
We do have a support group on the Discord.
You need someone from the path of the healer to talk to.
Heal my mind.
Yeah. Cool. Let's jump to the path of the outcast. The Asuryani Outcasts, or Asuryani, as whispered in the elegant cadences of the Aeldari lexicon and not in my foul speech, embody the contradiction of their kind. Beings of suppressing grace and intellect who nonetheless feel the stifling weight of their existence. These rare souls abandon the rigid paths of the Asuryani, forsaking the sanctuary of their craft worlds to wander the vast, perilous expanse of the galaxy. For some, the suffocation is intolerable. For others, exile is the price of an unforgivable transgression, such as succumbing to the path of damnation or a ruinous allure of the Aeldari's darkest impulses. Outcasts form a fragmented tapestry, each strand reflecting the degree of their estrangement from their kin. Some restless dreamers are drawn to the uncharted realms of the cosmos, taking the path of the outcast as an indulgence of wanderlust. Their journey is often transistent, and many return to their craft worlds bearing treasures, stories of new horizons, and the echoes of distant battles. Gifts that enrich the Asuryani people even as they unsettle them. Others abandon the path entirely, wandering for solar decades without the discipline that shields the Aeldari mind. These exiles, bereft of the structured serenity of the Asuryani past, must face the raw intensity of their heightened consciousness alone. Their psychic brilliance becomes a lure for demons, and their insatiable hunger of the great enemy, Slaanesh. Only those of unparalleled resolve can endure for long without succumbing to the madness or oblivion. Yeah, so that's an interesting example of like what happens if you're not on one of these paths. Like you slowly start to get more and more demons popping up around you. And then Slaanesh just has that much more pull on you when your emotions are kind of left unchecked, or you're not just feeling one emotion, you're feeling all the emotions in that full intensity. You're snorting that heroin or however you take it. I'm more of a cocaine guy down in Panama, but you're boiling that. Who knows if I'm serious or not? That's the fun part about who I am. That's the problem. But yeah, this is like that kind of example of what happens to Eldar. Like, you slowly start to kind of lose yourself or get lost to Slaanesh. You're walking that fine line.
You know, I hate to say it, but this is like, I know it's sort of fictionalized, but this is actually very human. I feel like when we like don't have a path or like a mission or something larger than ourselves that we're like a part of, or in like something that is driving us, a discipline, a goal, what have you,
a reason to get up in the morning.
Yeah, like people really do. I think especially men, probably women to some degree, but I think especially men like can really go off the rails if they don't have something sort of anchoring them down to like psychological. I think there's something very psychological about it, but it's like it sort of feels like it almost resonates with me personally. It's like this is good,
We're really delving deep into our psyches.
Yeah. Are there any Eldar self-help books, I wonder? So
David Jordan, another idea to write down.
Yeah. We got the Tal Fire Warrior book now, and we got this.
Your Book of Tyranny.
Yeah.
Among the outcasts, some seek the crude vitality of the Exodites, living amidst the untamed beauty of the Maiden Worlds, or delve into the chaotic dominions of lesser species. Their minds, untethered and vulnerable, are dangers to the craft world, inviting predators from the warp and unsettling the discipline of their brethren. For the young, the allure of such unrestrained freedom is intoxicating and romanticize the wanderers and their whispered tales sowing seeds of discontent. The wildest of these renegades evolved into Corsairs, blending their inherent elegance of the Aeldari with the feral and mercurial nature. These marauders filt between starships and craft worlds, plundering orcs, humans, and even their own kind, selling their martial prowess as mercenaries or charting voyages of exploration that inevitably spiral into bloodshed. The distant discipline of the Asuryani fades from memory, allowing the Eldari's ancient, untamed spirit to reassert itself in all its capricious splendor, by turns magnanimous and cruel. Yet, despite their estrangement, Corsairs' fleets are not wholly severed from the greater whole. They may unite with craftworld vessels to confront shared threats or partake in rare alliances with the enigmatic Drukhari. Such fleeting unity, however, fuels the perception of mankind that the Eldari are a singular race of pirates and slavers, their actions bound by no morality but their own inscrutable whims. Thus, the Asuryani outcasts walk a razor edge, embodying the fractured essence of the species, at once tragic, beautiful, and devastatingly unpredictable. Yeah. It's very...
This is the fun
path. This is the fun path. Yeah, it is if you are like an entrepreneur, you have that self-drive to kind of do something, but not everyone has that. Not everyone has that kind of take life by the balls kind of mentality and get after it.
Some people like to take life by the horns rather than the balls, but each to their own, I guess.
I bullfight in a different way than you, Christian.
Oh, we know how to bullfight.
Are you fighting that bull?
Purge in the chat says, would the path of the outcast be their version of ego death or them embracing their ego?
I think it's more like embracing their ego for sure, because ego death would be like, you're not living for yourself. Like, who are you? What are you doing? Like, you're no better than anyone else. We're all connected. If you're killing your own ego, are you really going and raiding planets and like taking their stuff? You're like, no, I'm not better than them. I shouldn't take their shit.
That's true, but yes, that is true. I agree with you for the most part. There could be, I mean, like we said at the top of the show, there could be like the people on the path of the outcast are viewed as outcasts, right? So there could be someone who's trying to kill their ego by going on the path of the outcast. Maybe they've mastered a different path or what have you, and then they have had that view of that path as like something lesser than, and so they go through some sort of existential crisis, blah blah blah, and then they're like, okay, I'm gonna humble myself and go on the path of the outcast. I don't know, it's just a thought, but
yeah. And then I wonder too, like, just talking more like the path of the Asuryani is very much a recent endeavor of the Aeldari species. Like, this is not their natural state. This isn't how they've been living for the last 60 million years. This is just a snippet of 10,000 years in their history. So going on like the path of the outcast and doing that ego death, I wonder if it could just be like you're kind of destroying everything about who you are, who your current culture is, and you're embracing just like, I don't want to say like the animalistic nature of the Aeldari, but like the base nature of Aeldari. Like, what are we good at? What is truly making us happy? Like
Their primal nature.
their primal nature. Yeah. So you're killing off yourself, like, because yourself is like, no, I got to master things, be disciplined. But if you kill that part off, then yeah, maybe you kind of go into that primal nature, that true form of Aeldari, kind of just following your instincts.
Yeah, I think both are. I think the whole thing about the outcasts is that it isn't. They're the free spirits. They're the ones that don't fit in, and that could be for either reason, right? Like the same way a hippie doesn't fit in like mainstream society. The same way like a really militant survivalist, right? Like hippies and survivalists are both like countercultural, but they have very different like personal philosophies or reasons of why they don't fit in. And any number of those like subgroups of like outcasts and misfits. So it could be someone who, like Jordan said, is trying to pursue like a death to self or had some kind of existential experience, or like what Mark was saying too, or even that primal drive, right? Like any one of those, I think, are plausible and likely reasons to become an outcast, right? It's just, again, it's the people that don't fit in.
For the record, I think like probably the majority of Eldar that are going on this path are doing it more for ego reasons than ego death reasons. Like, I think that's clear just how it's written, right? But
it makes the most sense naturally. But I was like, again, I'm only trying to leave the door open for like someone's cool idea.
Yeah. So we have the word for humanity. Like, is there, in your guys' knowledge, a similar word for like Eldar humanity, or like any Star Wars Xenos aliens that have like their own term of humanity? Does that question make sense?
Like
we brought this up on a previous episode, like a couple episodes ago, of just like, yeah, what would you call Eldar humanity? Like, okay, they're doing things humanely, but like,
oh, I see what you're saying.
I think the closest you can get to is the division between sentience and non-sentience. And the reason I say that is because even this comes up in Star Wars with so many different species, is most species don't have like a common sense of what their essence is. Like something that could appear psychopathic to our humanness might not be to another alien race that has no conception of individuality, right? Or no conception of, right, things that we feel are human feelings. Maybe they have no emotions. Maybe they're strictly like logical, like Spock, right? Those kinds of aliens. So like, I think it's hard to paint everything with a brush of humanness, and really just the dividing line would be sentience and non-sentience. Are they an animal, or can they think and operate with a level of independent consciousness?
Okay, I think that dials it in a little bit closer to what we were talking about for sure. That kind of helped. Yeah. That's a nice kind of dividing line of, are you kind of aware of yourself? Do you like, and your race is aware of themselves, or are you just kind of running off instinct? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll coin a term one day for Eldar humanity, Eldmanity, but it just doesn't roll off the tongue.
Eldaranity.
There we go. That's the one. The essence of being an Eldar.
Yeah. or even essence is a good word, right? Like the essence of whatever X species that you're talking about. What is the essence of a Tyranid? What is the essence of a Necron? What is the essence of an Eldar? And they would all be very different, right? Like they don't,
Yeah.
and they're very different from humanity too. They don't fit our typical molds.
Yeah.
Like orcs, right? To us, they're completely psychopathic. To them, they're having a really good time because their species operates under a certain set of parameters, is what drives them.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's talk about purpose.
Ah.
The rigid structures of the Asuryani path, so delicately woven into the fabric of the craftworld society, are not a sanctuary for all. For some, even those nurtured within its embrace, the constraints become an intolerable yoke. These souls forsake their craftworld, stepping onto the path of the outcast or abandoning the paths entirely. The outcast bears an immense burden. The tempestuous emotions and potent psychic gifts of the Aeldari, left untempered by the discipline of their kind's way of life. It is a life few can endure for long without succumbing to madness or corruption. Yet many endure for Terran years, even solar decades, wandering the galaxy before returning to their paths and solemn warmth of their craftworld's halls. Exile, however, is a crueler fate, cutting these wayfarers off from the solace of home. Yeah, so just the difference between those that choose to leave and those that get kicked out, essentially. They always have the chance of coming back. If you chose to leave, you can always come back. But if you're kicked out, you're on your own forever, and whatever fate befalls you is kind of on you.
The path of the prodigal son.
Yeah. And that'd be cool. The path of the prodigal is like former outcasts that have come back.
Oh, yeah.
Has a nice ring to it. Path of the prodigal, too.
Mhm.
Actually, prodigal doesn't actually mean that either. That's a misconception, hey?
What does it fucking mean? I've been lied to again by the church. Is that what you're telling me?
No. Like,
Damn it.
it's the story is true, but what it comes to mean when you say it isn't someone returning. It means to be like frivolous and wasteful. It's the story of the wasteful son because that's what he did. But because people associate so much with the story of the prodigal son, they assume prodigal means a redemptive arc, but it doesn't. The word prodigal actually just means being like a wasteful person.
Yeah, by profuse or wasteful expenditure. Yeah, reckless.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah, frivolous. So the path of the prodigal isn't necessarily what it would be called because
So my parents were right when they called me that.
calling you a prodigal, yes. And they continue to call you one to this day. I lost my place. The existence of an outcast is perilous, their unbound psyche a beacon to the horrors of the warp. Demons and other malevolent entities are drawn to the psychic resonance of these wanderers, threatening not only the outcasts but the craftworlds they might visit. The Wraithbone cores and infinity circuits, the very heart of these sanctuaries, can be jeopardized by the dark forces that follow in the outcast's wake. For this reason, their presence is often tolerated only briefly. Yet the danger they bring is not solely metaphysical. The tales spun by outcasts of freedom, adventure, and plunder captivate the young and the untested, kindling a longing that can distract from the paths and unravel the carefully maintained order of the craftworld life.
Yeah, that is cool that like they definitely they welcome these people back and stuff, but they don't want to advertise this as a path to go on. Like this is an unofficial path for sure, and they're not telling their kids, when I was your age, I went on the path of the outcast and had a great time. Like they know that that's not beneficial for craftworld society.
Yeah, it might ignite that same questioning in a young 100-year-old Eldar's mind, barely developed.
So supple.
Yeah, so young. Outcasts pursue diverse fates. Some become rangers, solitary scouts whose mastery of survival and deadly precision with long rifles makes them unparalleled marksmen. Among them, the most skilled are revered as pathfinders, navigating the galaxy's wilds with preternatural grace. Others wander farther afield, seeking the primitive vigor of the Exodites or the alien worlds of mankind. I like rangers because they do feel almost kind of like your doomsday survivalist types that like build a bunker in the woods and like just go and live there. Like, yeah, you got running water at home, but they choose to live like this.
Backward savages.
There are those whose path leads to the tempestuous life of Corsairs, the wild raiders and privateers of the Aeldari. These hardened souls embrace a life of predation. Their pragmatism and toughness often dark mirrors of the craft world, Aeldari's introspective serenity. But such a life is not without peril. For the Corsairs who stray too far, the whispers of the path of damnation grow ever louder, leading some to the dark streets of Cormorra, where they join the Drakari in their unending pursuit of suffering and depravity. It makes sense. Like, if your whole life is based on plunder and raiding, of course, you're going to be really tempted by more of the same.
Yeah. You start taking a couple slaves, then before you know it, you wake up in a fever, like, drinking all these slave souls and trading them off, using them as currency. Yeah. It's just one bad day away, really.
1 century to another, boom, all of a sudden. I like the Corsair lifestyle too, because it harkens to, like, in real life, like pirates and like the notion of freedom, like, you know, rejecting the shackles of like British society or whatever, and then, you know, becoming raiders and living on their own terms, right?
Yeah.
When you have such like a stratified society as, like, you know, a lot of the European nations in the Age of Sail, you know, like you have nobles and commoners and that stuff. Like, becoming a pirate could be tempting if you've lived your whole life on the sea and just been like someone's, you know, a little better than a slave. Suddenly you have a chance to like live for yourself. So I can see like that aspect being appealing to an Eldar.
Yeah.
Not all, however, fall to such darkness. A rare few hear the capricious laughter of Kegarach in their dreams and join the Harlequins, the enigmatic performers who traverse the fractured realms of their kin. Through their art and movement, they seek to preserve the fragile threads of a unified Aeldari culture. More recently, many outcasts have rallied to the Ynnari, drawn by the words of Yvraine, prophet of Ynid, the god of the dead. The elders of the craftworlds, wary of Ynnari's radical vision, have named these defectors the Pathless, denouncing their choices as reckless folly. In every outcast, the beauty and tragedy of the Aeldari race is laid bare, a struggle to balance the boundless potential of their spirit with the ever-present danger of their nature. It is a life of freedom shadowed by peril, and for many, it is a spark that both liberates and consumes them. I gotta stop drinking energy drinks while I'm talking. Cut down on 90% of my burps on mic.
I wonder, like, Ynnari and stuff, that faction. I feel like they kind of threw it in there so half-assed, and they throw in Dark Eldar and they throw in Craftworlder, but they kind of still lack their own like real flavor to them. You know, they're describing the Ynnari as pathless, yet we look and there's aspect warriors there who are very much on the path of the warrior. Or are they? Maybe they just carried their war gear on, and like it could use some work. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you have to kind of justify it yourself. I think, like you said, everything written after a certain year and like Games Workshop timeline, like you see how much effort they put into like crafting Eldar Society, and just the lore that's come out recently is always just like half cooked, not totally ready, not totally thought through, and then like you never hear of it again, right? Like, what's the last big take on Yvraine or the Ynnari?
Yeah, like 8th edition is the last time I heard anything about them, and like they got 3 models, and that was that.
And now they're updating all their Eldar models, and they're all going back to the old school paths. So it's like you're not even releasing new models that are like this new pathless faction, right? There's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Kind of lazy.
Yeah.
Well, shall we jump into the Rangers? So they stand as the lone shadows of the Asuryani craftworlds, scouts whose survivalist instincts and peerless precision with long rifles make them formidable hunters. Their unmatched skill allows them to pierce even the smallest vulnerabilities in the heaviest armor, their aim unerringly finding the eye socket and neck joints of their foes. Nice.
He shot his dick off.
Yeah.
It was so tiny, but he still did it.
You shut up. I'm trying to read. Among these wanderers, the most adept are celebrated as pathfinders, masters of their solitary art. The path of the Asuryani, with its disciplined focus and emotional restraint, was forged as a bulwark against the insidious pull of Slaanesh, the chaos god ever hungering for Aeldari souls. To stave off this predation, the craft world Aeldari narrow their existence to the mastery of a single craft, perfecting it before moving on to another. Yet for some, this rigid framework proves unbearable, whether driven by restless wanderlust and inability to adhere to such singular devotion, or a deep disdain for the suffocating constraints of craft world society. They turn to the path of the outcasts. These outcasts, equipped to endure the untamed wilderness of distant worlds, are the rangers. Wandering far from the wraithbone halls of the craft worlds, they live as self-reliant nomads, their every step steeped in solitude. Yet their bond with their kin is not always severed. Many rangers, though estranged, remain steadfastly loyal to their craft world, heeding the call to war when it arises. In such times, they become vanguard and sniper, their sharp eyes and unerring aim wreaking havoc on enemy forces, striking down commanders, and unraveling the cohesion of entire armies. The legend of the Ranger's preternatural accuracy echoes even among the Aeldari themselves, a people already blessed with unmatched grace and sight. These solitary marksmen embody a keenness of perception and lethality that few can rival. But the path of the Ranger is a perilous one. Some are lost to the alien dangers of distant worlds, their fate swallowed by the unknown. Others fall victim to their passions, slipping into the thrall of Slaanesh, and the doom that lurks ever on the edges of Aeldari existence. Yet, for many, the journey is not their end. Scarred and tempered by their time in exile, they return to their craft worlds, bearing a deeper understanding of themselves and their place within Aeldari society. That's kind of interesting. Like, for a lot of them, it's almost like a detour in their life, and then they come back to their to society or their craft world or what have you.
Yeah, everyone needs like a time of peace and just reflection, and
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know if you get that when you're on one of the paths. Like, yeah, you focus on something so deeply and intently, but it's not usually inward and on the whole picture. So
Yeah, there's something a little more like exploratory, I would say, or novel about the path of the outcast. And if you're a ranger, so whereas when you're doing like a lot of these other paths, it's so disciplined and regimented. You're doing the same thing every single day in, day out. And on this path, it's you getting something new constantly. So yeah, it can definitely be a change of pace.
I know for me, even personally, just moving down to Panama on an island where there's no distractions of modern society or anything like that. Like, I can get some real good thinking in, or just let my imagination just take me on crazy trails where I wouldn't necessarily have the same thought processes as I would if I was doing a 9 to 5 job and you're stuck in traffic for an hour and you got to go home and unwind for a weekend. There's something just solitary. And the last episode we did together, we talked about Pure Tide and how he went onto the mountaintop and started writing down all his philosophy. And it's this like kind of tale of like isolation where you really get like the best of yourself out.
Yeah, like a lot of people feel like they think better, they go out to nature, they love going on forest walks or hikes and like climbing mountains and just like getting away from, like you said, distractions of daily life. And for some people, of course, like if you live in a situation where that's more common than not, but for those who are locked into that 9 to 5 type lifestyle, that time is a good time for them to do that reflection that they couldn't do at home. It's just get out into the woods or get out into the wilderness.
Yeah. And for those who walk the path of the ranger, the wilderness beyond their craft worlds serves as both crucible and sanctuary. In its vast, uncharted expanse, they confront the frailty of their nature and the unyielding strength required to master it, embodying the tragic duality of their race. Boundless potential is shadowed by inevitable peril. So,
You know, the Eldar symbol that comes up a lot, like I always found odd. Like a lot of at least their old transfer sheets and stuff that they used to really use, it's a lot of yin yang symbolism. And that duality that keeps coming up in their story makes a lot more sense now. I never really cared for the Eldar, so I never really looked into it, but now it's all just coming together in my mind.
Excellent. We got some questions here. One from Grimaldus. Pointy helmets off. Could one tell a Dark Eldar from an Eldar? Yes, absolutely. Dark Eldar are definitely more white skin, like gaunt almost.
Pale.
Very pale. Yeah, that's a better word than white skinned.
Is that always
like
the case? Like, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it is.
They live in Cormorant, which is dark all the time. Like, they're not.
I think it has more to do with like soul sickness, though.
Okay, it's like
that's
sickly.
not like
they're
like they're feeding on the souls of other races, and in return, like that you almost turn into like haunted vampire form. That's definitely me saying soul sickness is not an actual 40k term, but that's kind of a good way to describe it. Like, you're doing something very heinous to your body and to other people's bodies, and like, yeah, it just doesn't reflect.
It's corrupting.
Yeah. And then Purge says they're the 40k vagabonds taking the trades, traveling the cosmos, making a living from it. So that's kind of what he says about the path. We go a little further now on the path of the outcasts and the rangers, and we get the exarchs of the rangers. So the people who have been lost on the path, they're called pathfinders. Pathfinders are the most seasoned and formidable of the Asuryani rangers, having walked the path of the outcasts for many Terran centuries. Over time, they have resisted the temptations that threaten to engulf their kind, seductive indulgences, and savage impulses that would see their souls consumed by Slaanesh. Yet despite overcome these perils, they remain drawn to the solitude and freedom of the outcast path, unable to return to the constraints of the craft world. Their skills surpass even those of the standard rangers. Pathfinders are masters of infiltration, surviving in environments that would overwhelm lesser beings, and excelling in the art of guerrilla warfare. Though Pathfinders can be found across the galaxy, it is the craft world of Alatok that are most famous for producing these elite individuals. Alatok is a society built upon rigid devotion to the Asuryani life paths. As such, it is often the youth that this craft world who find the structures of the discipline suffocating. Many young Aeldari from Alatok rebel against the controlled existence that defines their home and seek the freedom of the outcast path. It is from this craft world that the largest number of pathfinders arise, their desire for adventure and autonomy driving them to wander the stars. Pathfinders have honed their craft over centuries, becoming experts in disrupting their enemies long before the main forces of Aeldari engage in battle. They operate behind enemy lines, using their unparalleled skills to sabotage the enemy's infrastructure, dismantle their supply chains, and sow discord among their ranks. Their tactics are precise and ruthless, bypassing sentries, destroying vital equipment, and executing covert assassinations of key leaders. With each action, they inflict damage not only on the enemy's numbers, but on their morale, leaving the foe shaken and disorganized as they struggle to regain cohesion. This chaotic formation led by Pathfinders this chaotic foundation laid by the Pathfinders enables the Eldari's more mobile forces to strike with devastating precision, exploiting the newly exposed weaknesses in their enemies' defenses. The efficiency and grace with the Asuryani conduct their warfare are not merely trademarks, they are the culmination of centuries of strategic brilliance, honed by those who have walked the path of the outcast and mastered the art of war. Yeah, so this is cool. Like these guys have been away and have somehow managed to kind of shake off the ever feeding presence of Slaanesh, and they've kind of mastered their body and their mind, whether through solitary, like just thinking and whatever, or however they manage to do it. They are able to do it for centuries.
I like to think some of their disciplines include like the art of survivalism, right? Like there is an artistry to living in the wilderness and away from like the comforts of home for them. And that kind of
Yeah,
keeps their mind disciplined, right? Like
yeah, and that's like a tough life. Like if you're actually thrown into out into the wild and told to survive, like you're not gonna be able to make it. Like you spend all your waking time trying to catch your next meal, essentially. So even that alone would kind of be enough to keep you away from Slaanesh. If you're there's no time for any excess. You know, you're thinking of that next meal, that next battle, that next way to survive.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that that has a self reinforcing kind of natural discipline instilled in it, right? Cuz like you said, if you're not disciplined about those things, you're just going to die out there. And obviously you won't have the time to get corrupted if you're dead. So, yeah, there's like a natural discipline that arises from survivalism.
Grimaldus asks, so could an Eldar eventually look like one after hundreds of years? Yeah, like Eldar from the craft world, they can, you know, they could start on this kind of path. They go on the path of the outcasts, and maybe they're a ranger at first, but then they really start to loot things. You know, they're to survive, they need to steal food, and then they slowly go on the path of the Corsair, and then they slowly go on the path of damnation after they had a bunch of slavers, and then you know that process slowly happens and they start feeding on more souls where yeah they could eventually look like a full dark Eldar.
Getting corrupted, dark elder. Yeah. And then that's saying nothing too of like also I was going to mention like cultural artifacts of Eldar and Dark Eldar, like Dark Eldar typically engage in things like scarification and piercings and just other practices that kind of give them away. Even if you look at the models, right, like their heads are distinctive, right? Tattoos and
Wacky haircuts.
yeah.
Yeah. Purge asks, does sowing chaos feed chaos like taking out an ammo depot? Yeah, this is something I always see people really don't get how the warp works. It's very simple. Like the warp is a reflection of emotions. There are some things that do not cause emotions. Like if you blow up an ammo depot, does that ammo depot have emotions? No. Now maybe there's a bunch of people in it who feel that chaos and the panic, and that will make the warp a little more turbulent. But like I see all the time people talking about a fifth chaos god and Vashtar, because machines and stuff, but machines don't have emotions, man. Like that's not what the warp is. It's not just like what people do create a god. It has to be a very distinct and powerful emotion. Like if you look at the gods that exist, they're like very core emotions of what we are, whether it's plotting and scheming or violence or just death. Like it's a very strong emotion that has to be put into the warp for it to actually kind of create and feed chaos to any significant degree.
Yeah. Like a good easy example is like corn, for example. If I kill you dispassionately and just like, I have no emotion in the act of killing you. Like maybe I had to do it for survival. I'm hunting a deer and I kill a deer, right? Like I didn't revel in its death or like, cut off its head and celebrate some kind of victory, right? It's just an act versus, yeah, like you face off against an enemy. And that goes both ways. It's not just bloodlust. It's also like martial pride. So like I come from a warrior culture and it's a great honor for me to defeat you in combat. Like that can feed
Yeah.
into corn because there's that emotional aspect in the killing.
Yeah. Yeah. So whenever we're dealing with the warp and what actually affects the warp, it's not just actions, it's the emotions behind the actions. I think that kind of wraps up the first half of the path of the outcast. You know, a lot the Rangers are one of these things that we have a great tabletop model for it, and that kind of limits our idea of what it is. Like, oh, they wear green coats and they have sniper rifles, but the path of the ranger can be so much more than just that. You know, it can be that crazy guy out on some foreign planet wrapped up in his furs on this ice world, just kind of eating berries to survive year after year after year. And he might not ever engage with anything else beyond that, but the way GW just has limited kind of time and options or whatever kind of limits our scope of this. But I encourage you to kind of broaden your horizon when you're thinking about the path of the outcast, specifically like rangers and stuff.
Yeah, and even like professions that we might not necessarily list. If you can think of like a cool alternative that, like, yeah, you're an outcast, you don't fit in, and your Eldar is doing something radical and off the disciplined paths, right?
Yeah,
like a drug dealer.
like the path of the drug dealer.
Path of the drug dealer.
Yeah. And then the other main one we have is the Corsairs.
Yeah. Before I jump into that, I just had a thought that came to me. I don't know. I just sit here and like imagine things and thinking about the differences in looks between Eldar and Dark Eldar. A lot of this isn't true of all Dark Eldar, of course, but a lot of the most recent like painted models are often depicted with what color hair, Mark?
Red.
Yes, a lot of them are redheads. Interestingly enough, what is the thing that Dark Eldar lack? Was that intentional? Was that intentional in GW? Is that like it just occurred to me. I wonder if someone like at some level was pulling a 5D joke. 5D chess joke.
I like to think so now, yes. And if not, we can pretend that that's what they're up to.
We can pretend that was the case, yeah.
You heard it here from Christian on Warhammer.
Yeah, they all depicted as redheads.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's get into Corsairs.
Who are not all redheads, by the way. I have seen some black-headed.
Black-haired.
Of course.
Corsairs. Aeldari Corsairs are a particular breed of Asuryani outcasts, those who have willingly chosen a life of piracy, preying upon the commerce of other starfaring species across the Milky Way, with a special focus on raiding the merchant vessels of the Imperium of Man. Though they are a constant menace to Imperial shipping, they lack the strength to challenge the full might of the Imperial Navy battle fleet, and thus they strike with swift, calculated raids before vanishing into the void. The Aeldari, fully aware that it is their own indulgent desires and capricious whims that led to the downfall of their once glorious species and gave birth to the chaos god Slaanesh, they have sought ways to contain their inner urges. The survivors of the fall, known as the Asuryani, have developed a strict system of emotional control and personal discipline. Each Asuryani chooses a path they must master in order to maintain their self-control. These paths can span many standard years and often require dedication that far surpasses the lifespan of a typical human. The paths are varied and some lead to highly specialized roles. For instance, the path of the warrior encompasses numerous aspects, each designed to hone a specific aspect of martial prowess. While all warriors master combat, each aspect introduces distinct techniques and abilities, creating a diversity of combat styles within the path. Other paths include that of the bone singer, the psychotechnicians who craft wraithbone, and other materials. Yet there are those who cannot endure the rigidity of the path. For them, the confines of the craftworlds are stifling. They become outcasts, and they're forced to leave behind the disciplined lives of their people. Freed from the protection of the path, these outcasts are vulnerable, their intense emotions and psychic powers unbound, making them susceptible to the dangers that lurk in the far reaches of the galaxy. Among them, the Corsairs stand apart. Their lives are shaped by the need to survive and thrive through raiding and plundering, their exploits leading them to be both feared and reviled. Corsair lords like Iban Luma, the Black Prince of Slaanesh, and Lord of the Baelstrom Avengers, command their crews with ruthless precision, striking fear into the hearts of their targets, yet always knowing that their survival hinges on their ability to remain swift and elusive. A question on Corsairs. Would they raid other craft worlds?
Man, that's a good question. Like, obviously you always have that one example of them doing it, but I think it's far more likely that they come to the aid of their home world, craft world, because the path of the outcast is not a permanent path. They might just be doing this for a little bit. In fact, it is kind of limited in nature, because the longer, the more centuries or decades that you're on it, the more likely Slaanesh is to feed on you. So either you get lost on the path, or you go to the path of damnation, or ultimately you do return home. So I don't think they're, going around attacking craft worlds very often. Like,
Yeah, you'd have to have very good reason.
yeah, like maybe the reason why you left your craft world is because you killed another Aeldari in cold blood, and now you're out for revenge against them. You could always come up with those examples, but definitely not commonplace. Like, you eventually are going back to your craft world.
Yeah, and if you go full on raiding other craft worlds at that point, you're pretty well down the path of damnation. Like,
Yeah.
Purge in the comments just said if they were exiled, they might want to get revenge. So yeah, like that could be a cool plot or story, but definitely would be unique.
Yeah.
The Corsairs' path is one of freedom, and danger, where every day is a gamble, and the rigid structure of the craft world is nothing more than a distant memory. Though they may walk a darker, more tumultuous path, Aeldari Corsairs remain bound by the same desire for self-mastery that drives all Asuryani. Though their path is one of chaos, it is their own, forged in the fires of independence and survival. After many standard years spent in wandering and adventure, or drifting among the pirate fleets in the vastness of space, most Asuryani eventually find their way back to the structure and sanctuary of the Asuryani Pass. These Aeldari pirates, however, are followers of the path of the Outcast. Asuryani who have turned their backs on the rigid structure of the craft worlds, abandoning their path to embrace a life of freedom and lawlessness. These eldritch wanderers are separated from the disciplined, orderly lives of the craft world Aeldari, forming ferocious bands of pirates, corsairs, and raiders. For many of them, this life is a deliberate rejection of the paths they were once expected to walk, choosing instead to follow their whims and desires across the galaxy. While some of these outcasts eventually return to the Asuryani Pass, seeking the familiar order of their people. Others remain forever lost in their unrestrained lives. Despite their lawless nature, many retain ties to their craft worlds, though these connections are often strained and distant. The actions of these outcasts stand in stark contrast to the careful, scried decisions of the Farseers and the careful planning of the craft world Aeldari. The wisdom of the seers, who foresee the future and guide their people along a calculated path, does not align with the impulsive and often reckless actions of the outcasts. This disconnect causes the Farseers to view the outcasts with great caution and reluctance, often keeping their distance from the wayward individuals who live outside the rigid structure of the paths. However, there are rare occasions where a more volatile, self-serving Aeldari Corsair fleet will come into temporary alliance with the craft worlds. Such alliances are uncommon, yet not entirely unheard of. They generally occur when the Corsair's leader of significant power and influence is involved, capable of both satisfying the needs of the seers and proving his strength and might to the more aggressive pirates under his command. These leaders, like the legendary Prince Irael of Liandon, are few in number but possess fleets of great power, able to challenge even the Imperial Navy's might with substantial opposition.
Yeah, Prince Uriel has a cool story, and I do have him. I have a document full of episode note ideas, and he's definitely in there. He's got some cool stuff for him, but that's for another episode soon. TM.
Nice. Some Corsairs go even further, offering their services as mercenaries to wealthy factions within the Imperium. These fleets, though often feared for their ruthlessness, are a powerful addition to any battlefield for their human patrons. Yet the fickleness and treachery of Aeldari Corsairs are legendary. More than once they have been known to betray their human employers after a battle is won, seizing a greater share of the rewards. In such moments, the blood of their once allied patrons often stains the Corsairs' blades, and a reminder of their untrustworthiness and self-serving nature. Aeldari Corsairs, living by their own code, are creatures of unpredictability and passion, embodying the very essence of the outcast path. They wander the stars unbound and free, leaving a trail of chaos and conquest in their wake, all while remaining tethered to the ancient and complex history of their race.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, like Christian, as you said, kind of, it's that age of the sail. It's that typical kind of pirate life for me. They're just doing what they want to do. Now, here's the question. I wonder how connected, what they think of Eldari gods is. Like when they go into war, do they still put on, the avatar of Kane's war paint, or is that more craft worldy? Like maybe they're not summoning avatars, but do they still kind of acknowledge them, partake in some of these Eldari mythos?
Yeah, I'd imagine they still like nothing, unless you're really on the path of damnation. Nothing really screams that they've become atheistic or anti-religious, right? Like
Yeah.
I think those are cultural to their core, and to them it's true, right? Like these gods exist. It's just a matter of fact. It's like denying that the stars exist. Like
Yeah.
it would be silly. It would be silly to them. They wouldn't even conceptualize that.
Yeah, I just
So
wonder, like,
yeah,
yeah, I do have in my episode ideas note to do a Eldar Pantheon episode. But like, I wonder if there's any gods in that pantheon that kind of goes against this, like that specifically say you shouldn't be doing these kind of things. So in kind of doing these, you're just naturally turning your face on the pantheon. I just don't know enough about it, but
yeah. I think there's a distinction between the path system and their religion.
sure.
Because like I said, to the Eldar, like it's a fact. It's a matter of fact when you talk about their mythos.
Yeah,
It's not like the gods imposed the path system on them. It's like self-imposed.
sure.
There's no real connection between that other than Cain, which makes sense because you're, worshiping the god of war when you're all dedicated to warfare. But again, that's from them. It's not like Cain says you have to be on a path to worship him.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Because the gods predate the path system by a long time. And as far as we know, that the whole thing with the gods is more than just stories. Like they might have been mythologized, or we might not know their true nature, but they do exist.
Yeah,
To the Eldar, know they exist, right? Like the god Yanari exists. Cain obviously exists.
sure.
So
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun episode to try to unpack all the mythos and like.
please have me on it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that will be the next Eldar episode we do, but that will be a ways in the future. But yeah, like I know at one point we hypotheticalized, were they old ones perhaps? Were they some type of warp entities that kind of took form? And yeah, hard to say, but that'll be a fun episode to unpack all that mythos. Back to the Corsairs. We're going to talk about their organization. Now, the thing about pirates, from what I know, they're not the most organized group. So, I do have some categories of stuff that people might fall into, but this can really be so varied and just whatever they want. Most Corsairs are led by a Corsair prince, but hell, why not a king? Do it. Who's going to stop you? You're a pirate. Live your pirate life. So we're going to talk about the Corsair Prince. An Aeldari Corsair band is typically led by a member of the ancient nobility known as a prince or princess who has chosen the path of the outcast. To human eyes, these Aeldari may seem aloof or even arrogant, but their lineage speaks of an ancient aristocracy steeped in tradition and honor. Born from the remnants of the lost Aeldari Empire, these figures are natural leaders, brilliant tacticians, and fierce warriors on the battlefield, commanding the respect of their fellow followers with the gravitas of the royal heritage. Their presence inspires not only loyalty, but also a sense of purpose among their crew, making them formidable opponents in any conflict.
I think it's cool how they still hold to some level of tradition. Again, these are Eldar. They aren't people. They're not human. So they still seem to have some even though they are on the path of the outcasts and they're pirates, they have some respect for the old ways. So there's like a transcending cultural thing, which kind of speaks to the God question you had earlier.
Sure.
Right? Like they're still Eldar.
Yeah.
In their core.
Yeah. No, for sure. These guys will typically have a blade sworn retinue. The blade sworn retinue is a personal bodyguard of the Corsair prince or princess, formed from the finest and most skilled warriors in the band. This elite group travels with their leader wherever they go, acting as both protectors and trusted confidants. The retinue is composed of close kinsmen, veteran bridge officers, and outcasts who have proven themselves through their exceptional combat prowess or unique skills. These warriors are infamous through the Corsair ranks, their loyalty and deadly talents making them invaluable to their leader. Sworn to protect their prince or princess with their lives, they are the embodiment of discipline, ferocity, and devotion. I'm just picturing this like, you got a rogue trader who is your Corsair prince, and then you got his retinue who are these guys, this like wide assortment of people. I wonder if even in this kind of retinue, they might even have the odd Xenos in here thrown in. Maybe they saved somebody's life and they swore to protect them. I would imagine it's very rare, but do you think it's possible, or are they too arrogant for such a thing?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that would get in the way is their arrogance. They're certainly possible, or they might find utility in you. Like, like they find a species that's a good, like a Grinx or something that like amplifies their psychic potential or has a purpose or a function. But ultimately, again, Eldar are going to Eldar, and
Yeah, like you'd never really be a trusted confidant.
Yeah, you're never going to be one of the boys. That being said, I always like to leave that door open. Like if you got a good reason, like I said, my mind immediately goes to utility, but it could be like, yeah, maybe you were a human slave and you saved the prince's life, and like as a way to honor you, they're like, okay, you can roll with us. You'll never really be one of us, but you can hang out with us.
Yeah. Cool. Up next, we have Void Dreamers. Void Dreamers are the navigators and helmsmen of Corsair starships, and they are among the most powerful psychers in the Aeldari ranks. While closely related to warlocks, Void Dreamers channel their psychic powers in a unique manner, using their abilities in divination and prophecy to guide their ships through the stars. They act as a spiritual and tactical compass of the Corsair fleet, able to foresee the dangers of the warp and movements of enemy forces. Their psychic prowess protects the crew from the perilous creatures of the warp, while their foresight allows the Corsairs to strike at the right moments, ensuring their raids are of devastating and precise. The chat was saying a while back there, the Elder are on the path of the perfect time to strike. Striking at the perfect time, I dare say, is the most important path of all. Lots of that kind of talk in the chat, so that's always nice. The Void Storm Squad is up next. During Corsair raids, the Prince or Princess will hand pick or often assemble Void Storm squads, a hand-picked group of veteran Corsairs specifically chosen for their expertise in close quarters combat. These seasoned warriors are tasked with leading the charge in battle. The first to breach enemy defenses or storm enemy ships during boarding actions. Equipped for brutal, fast-paced combat, Voidstorm squadrons are deadly in hand-to-hand skirmishes, and their ability to overwhelm opponents with swift, coordinated strikes makes them an indispensable part of Corsair raids. Their presence turns the tide of battle, often leading to decisive victories for the Corsair forces. Cool. It's I kind of just picture the way some of these guys work. I just picture, okay, we got some of these broad categories, but each one of these guys, he doesn't care about the rules. He himself is on the path of the outcast, and you have to listen to your Corsair prince to some degree, but I don't think the prince is like, all of you guys must be equipped with shuriken pistol and power sword. There's so much flexibility in what they're wearing, what they're wielding. Even in their own mindset.
Yeah, I think also a good way to envision the whole like nobility part of it is like those leaders are less disciplinarian. That's the whole thing they're trying to escape. So like these are leaders that are leading with charisma. You're there because you want to be there. You are following this leader because you like them, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to distinguish the two. It's charisma based as opposed to like
Enforce or rules based. Yeah.
rules based. Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, like, yeah, they're all decked out in all kinds of equipment, whatever they can acquire, whatever their preferential fighting style is. Maybe this guy's really good with a sword, or you're really good with pistols, or really good with rifle. Like, that will shape kind of individually what you're rocking.
Yeah. And then we have the Corsair Squadron, the backbone of any Corsair band. The Corsair Squadron is made up of ship crews and soldiers who serve under the leadership of their felarch, a rank equivalent to the bosun in the Imperial Navy. These warriors are highly skilled, battle-hardened troops who are equipped for fast, nimble raids. Unlike the heavy infantry of the craftworld Aeldari, Corsair squads rely on mobility, speed, utilizing jetpacks, venoms, Vulcans to rapidly move across the battlefield. These squads excel in both offense and defense, making them versatile force capable of striking from unpredicted or unexpected angles, outmaneuvering their enemies and hitting where it hurts. These guys do have a model, a lot of these Corsairs and stuff, but they're Forge World specific, so they're harder to find. But they have some cool looking stuff. They have very unique style of jetpack that's different than like the swooping hawks and their wings. It's
I think they released a Corsair kill team, if I'm not mistaken, where a lot of this might come from too.
Yeah, and I feel like the Corsair kill team that they released, and maybe this is just me reading into it, is more like the Bladesworn retinue or possibly a Voidstorm squad, like more of the veterans as opposed to your baseline, which would be the Forge World kind of guys.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't mess with Eldar, so
No.
I can only collect so many factions. Come
on. There are more examples of Corsair units like Wasp Assault Walker Squadrons and Corsair jet bikes. We mentioned that they have Falcon tanks and Venoms and all that kind of stuff. They can have whatever they want. Like maybe they've raided some Tau and they use Devilfish for some reason, because maybe that's all they have the access to. They're out in the deep recesses of space and they don't have time to kind of get their good Eldar tech. So yeah, you could really have whatever you want.
Yeah, they probably don't go so far as like orcs, for example, where they just loot and pillage everything. They probably have a preference for their own tech, again, with their arrogance. And
Eldar is better tech, like in general. Like
yeah. But again, like you said, there's probably no reason, especially out of desperation, and you're in the deep of space with no real supply lines. Like, if you have to use a bolter, I'm sure they're not opposed to it if they have to.
Yeah, and I just feel like all these guys are like, they're trying to be fancy, and trying to one up each other. So, they're like, wait, what are you using over there for your pistol? It whips it out. It's like this cool fucking Archaeotech pistol, Like, he's like, yeah, check this out.
I found it on a dead guy.
Yeah. I killed this guy and took his pistol. Yeah. I feel like there would be a lot of one-upsmanship with the war gear.
Yeah, for sure. No, you know what's cool though is I just pictured how cool would it be doing kind of like the orc kit bash, but instead of like obviously slapping random pieces together, you loot, let's say, Tau technology, but you like grow.
Ooh. Wraithbone.
If you grow Wraithbone into it to like make it an amalgamation of your technology, that would be a real cool looking model.
Yeah, that would be very interesting to see how you could kind of blend the two together like that.
And you can do that with all kinds of stuff like guns or ships and different kinds, right? Like they would take it and they would grow their own tech into it. Again, probably out of desperation more than anything. It's not like they need your tech, but yeah. Potential.
Jackson in the comments says, fun fact, the Eldar invented the chainsword, so I'm pretty sure they'll be fine with using that.
The Eldar invented most things just because they're so old.
I guess, yeah, that makes sense.
They invented speech and language before we were monkeys on the waters.
Yeah. Purge asks, is there tabletop versions of them? We kind of answered that, but maybe we'll go into some more detail. There's definitely a lot of Forge World stuff. There's Corsairs, that kill team that they came out with. But also, man, you could just take like anything and kind of kit bash it. Like and by anything I just mean like you take like a craft world aspect warrior, you take some dire avengers, and he was on the path of the dire avenger, but now he left and he went on the path of the outcast, took some of that war gear with him. So maybe and you could have squads of some aspect warriors, kind of pseudo aspect warriors. They're not fully there, but maybe they have some of the war gear pieces still for some of the conversion possibilities.
Really cool kit bashing. Just like swooping hawk jetpack, a head from like a fire drake, and are they called fire drakes? Whatever the fire ones are called.
Yeah.
And then just mashing a bunch of models together. Also, you can mix in some Dark Eldar pieces too.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just pulling up now for anyone who is watching the YouTube some pictures of these models. You can see here they have these crazy jetpacks with the huge fins kind of coming off the back of them. These are just kind of your standard guys, but they're very cool looking.
If I'm not mistaken, the fins are they're more likely to engage in void combat, so it's a nice backup if you get knocked off into space or to assault a ship.
Yeah, these guys are pretty sweet. This is a conversion of what looks like Stormcast Eternals that have like Eldar weapons and arms and heads. Very cool, but just another example of just like they don't need to be
uniform,
standardized, uniform in any ways. You could really go wild with the kit bashing for sure.
Their kill team set that they came out with recently are pretty good too. They look like a lot more of a blend between Dark Eldar and Eldar.
Yeah, here's their kill team. Yeah, very cool. Like lots of robes and capes and stuff. Lots of like extra medallions and like trinkets I found exist on these ones.
Little treasures.
Yeah, and a little more crazy hairstyle too and stuff. But
no peg legs.
There is an eye patch. There is one with an eye patch. I will say.
That just hits me right. Yeah, very cool. Okay, yeah, very nice. Okay, back to the notes. Corsairs, despite sharing certain traits as Aeldari Outcasts, are by no means a standardized force. While they all live outside a rigid structure of the craft worlds and share a disdain for the conventional Asuryani path, their approach to raiding, warfare, and leadership varies greatly. Each Corsair band is led by its own hierarchy, with decisions often driven by the whims of a charismatic or powerful leader, rather than by any unified doctrine. Some bands may adopt a highly disciplined tactical approach using intricate strategies and coordinated strikes, while others may favor chaotic, unpredictable raids, driven more by personal vendettas or sheer opportunism. Their equipment and tactics also reflect the lack of standardization. One band might rely on sleek, fast-moving jet bikes and swift strikes, while another may use heavy use of walkers and assault squadrons. Even the nature of their alliances, whether with craft worlds or other pirate fleets, can shift wildly depending on circumstances. The Corsairs often choosing self-interest over loyalty. The only constant among them is their unyielding desire for freedom and their independence, but beyond that, their methods, ideologies, and compositions remain as varied as the stars themselves. Very cool. Yeah, like I really like how you could just go kind of ham with the conversions of these guys,
Yeah, I always really like the Artark models where they combine all the different aspect warriors, and I think there's a lot of potential with all the different, especially now they announced the release of a bunch of new updated Eldar kits and just mashing them all together. There's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, I wasn't going to mess with the Eldar, but I might now.
I'm kind of digging them too, yeah.
All right, let's land this plane and talk about our closing thoughts here. Exile and rebellion. The path of the outcast isn't just about physical wandering, but also emotional and philosophical rebellion. These individuals are often those who cannot conform to the highly structured and disciplined lifestyle of the craft worlds. Their choice to walk the path of the outcast is a form of self-exile, often a result of their inability to reconcile with the emotional suppression required by the Asuryani path system. It's not just a rejection of order, but a declaration of personal freedom. Self-discovery. For some, the path of the outcast is not just a rebellion against society, but also a journey of self-discovery. Many Aeldari find themselves on this path, not because they dislike structure, but because they are searching for something more. Whether that is freedom from emotional restraint or an attempt to reconnect with their lost culture and history following the fall. This path can lead to profound personal growth, and though it often comes at the cost of alienation from their kin. It's not just a phase, Mom. Emotional conflict. Though outcasts reject the strictures of the path, they often remain in a constant battle with their inner nature. Without the protection of the rigid paths, some outcasts find themselves drawn to excess, hedonism, or destructive behavior, which can eventually lead them to fall into the grasp of Slaanesh. The path is dangerous, balancing act between freedom and temptation, and not all outcasts find a way to return to the craftworlds.
Rangers, the lone wanderer. Rangers are often seen as the quintessential solitary figure, wandering the galaxy alone, driven by their personal code and duty to their craft world. While they do ally with other forces in battle, their role is largely solitary, scouting, observing, and eliminating threats from afar. This lonely existence fosters an unusual bond between the Rangers and the worlds they traverse, often making them more connected to the universe than their more sheltered kin back at the craft worlds. The long rifle as a symbol. The long rifle is more than just a weapon to the Rangers. It is a symbol of their skill, patience, and connection to the craft world. The rifle represents not only their precision as marksmen, but also their role as observers, quietly waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The weapon is an extension of the Ranger's mind, body, and soul, reflecting their calm, calculating approach to warfare. On stealth and precision, Rangers are trained in extreme stealth tactics, often blending into the environment and remaining unseen for hours, days, or even weeks, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Their patience and discipline makes them highly effective assassins and scouts. They are also skilled in navigating hostile environments, from barren planets to dense urban war zones, which makes them invaluable in reconnaissance and sabotage missions.
Just dropping a link right now in the chat for those who want to join us. We're almost done our read through section, but the last kind of closing thought and kind of summary that we'll go through is the Corsairs himself. Fluid and mercenary nature. Unlike the Rangers, who have a strict connection to their craft worlds, Corsairs are entirely free agents. They might choose to ally with a craft world, but they are primarily mercenaries, driven by their own self-interest, whether that be gaining riches, power, or simply the thrill of the hunt. This lack of central purpose makes them unpredictable and often dangerous allies or foes, with their loyalties changing as swiftly as the tides. Corsair Lords. Corsairs are often led by Corsair princes or lords, who are part of the Aeldari aristocracy. These leaders possess not only physical prowess, but also exceptional tactical minds, capable of guiding their bands through complex operations. The dynamics within a Corsair band are often tied to the charisma and ambition of its leaders, with a potential for charismatic Corsair prince to unite various factions under one banner, even temporarily. Christian, you called it for sure, even before I'm sure you read the notes. Like the Corsair lords are all just charisma based, you know. Pirate culture and wealth. Corsairs are often wealthy, as their piracy tends to yield valuable plunder from ships, planets, and other species. However, the wealth isn't always used for noble purposes. Many Corsairs live opulent lifestyles, indulging in hedonistic pursuits that directly defy the ascetic practices of their craftworld kin. Some Corsairs are known to establish their own fiefdoms in the galaxy, ruling over pirate fleets and trading in illicit goods. The curse of freedom. While Corsairs cherish their freedom, it is freedom that comes with a heavy cost. Their lack of structured society or commitment to the path means that they are often seen as outcasts by even by other outcasts. Corsairs often live in a world with constant danger from both the external threats and from their own reckless tendencies. Despite this, they are driven by the desire to escape the oppressive constraints of the past system, even if it means embracing a dangerous and chaotic existence. raiding with precision. Corsairs have been known for their swift, surgical raids on enemy ships and colonies. They use hit-and-run tactics that minimize risk while maximizing profit. Their fleets are small but highly mobile, equipped with fast ships, jet bikes, and specialized assault units, enabling them to strike quickly, inflict damage, and retreat before the enemy can retaliate. Corsairs value speed and surprise over brute force, relying on their agility, advanced technology, or to outmaneuver their enemies. Yeah. So that's kind of what we've learned about them. We're gonna get a call in here, and then we got a couple closing questions. Maybe we all just choose one or two, but we're gonna start with questions about the path of the Outcast specifically. And to the stage, we're gonna call up Jax of Vianden. Yo, hey, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good. What was your thoughts on the episode so far? Anything jump out at you?
I really like the Eldar, and I really like their path system. That's the one thing I noticed. And the second thing I noticed was the horniness of chat.
It wasn't as bad as the Tower episode, but still, hey, what the hell, people? You fucking nerds. Go touch a woman.
Hey, it's a tradition now.
I don't like this tradition.
The path of the virgin.
Path of the Virgin. Got him. Okay, we got some questions. Did either of you boys pick a question here to throw out to all of us?
No, I just wanted to comment, Jax, that you missed the point of the episode. It's about Outcasts, and you're all hooked on the path system here.
Yeah, and he has a craft world name attached to him.
Well, shit. I mean, I learned. I did my homework, but
All good, man.
But didn't get a passing grade. Did your homework, but still failed.
In some ways, that's more disappointing.
Okay, here's my question for you guys. If Outcasts were to establish their own society, what do you think it would look like in comparison to craftworlds and Drakari? Like, yeah, they kind of have this pirates society, but like, what's a famous pirate cove? Maybe it is called just Pirate Cove, and like, what would that look like for for these Path of the Outcast people?
Outcasts of the Caribbean.
The Caribbean stars, yes.
Now we're talking. Do you think such a place is even possible, or would it kind of just there's just too many different ideas and too many different notions that such a place isn't even really possible?
If you guys don't mind me going first to answer, but gotta say that sounds absolutely sick. Like imagine like Eldar take over like a Blackstone fortress or something, and they just use it as like a hub for like trading and like a mini camera that they just use to like as like a hub.
Yeah.
We've seen it worked with the with chaos with what's his nuts the one guy who like started a Space Marine Civil War. He made his own like little like space station area where like
Huron Blackheart.
yeah, Blackheart, thank you. Um he made his own like little like Blackstone fortress like hub for all chaos factions to like come together and like kind of like talk and trade. And in the book it was in steal other people and make slaves out of them, but still.
I would assume these such places exist. They're probably not super common, but like you could probably find them in like. I like your idea of Blackstone fortresses, but you know, even in an asteroid field or a moon somewhere, anywhere where they're kind of off the beaten path a little bit, so they don't attract too much attention, but enough that they can launch like pirate raids from pretty consistently and have like a kind of stable base to hang out in.
I bet the big difference is like in the dark city, there's violence everywhere, but I bet these places would have like a no violence rule. Like no one's allowed to commit crime against anyone else here. You can't rob anyone else here. There's that like honor among thieves that maybe would persist.
Yeah, it would be more like the noble pirate trope where they're like you said, Mark, yeah, like on thieves where they respect each other, they respect the rules of the place. They aren't dark Eldar, so they're not like constantly thirsting or needing to torture. It's just like a regular place of commerce, a regular place of trade. You know, raiders can go and come back safely and hang out there as just like a little haven.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like the size would be probably a lot smaller. like it, just the way that they would be, their whole attitude towards life, they probably couldn't scale or be like a threat to any other empires or anything like that. But it could probably work very well in like small enclaves.
That would be a very cool spot.
Don't mind me, but well, you see, their rules are more like guidelines. So
Oh, I mind.
but yeah, that would be pretty sick. Like a little like that would be a good like homebrew army though. Just like 500 Corsair infantry. Like your lore is just they come from the space rock. That's just like a giant hub.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of potential, and not just warfare. Like, I'd be interested in their daily lives. You could throw in extra Xenos, like dotting the area, like, because they're not necessarily xenophobic. So they could have some very cool stories and opportunities for kit bashing and modeling.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. I think do either of you guys have questions on the Path of the Outcasts, or do we jump to the Rangers and some questions?
Let's go to the Rangers.
Okay, well, there's 3 call-in guests, and there's 3 kind of main categories of talk. Jax, do you have anything else to say before we get, let's do Purge next, or?
Great episode as always. Subscribe to the Patreon if you're listening to Spotify, and peace out.
Hell yeah. Yeah, thanks. I think tonight I'm going to be thinking about this Eldar Pirate Cove that we're kind of coming up with. That'd be a fun RPG to do. So, very nice. Thanks for calling in, Jax. Yeah, okay, so up next we got Purge. Our next kind of topic and question, we're talking about Rangers. But
that was actually my favorite one too, so it works out.
Oh, perfect. What do you like about them?
More the fact that they go after logistic assets, and they're an elite force that goes after logistic assets. When we look at the Space Marines, it's usually the Scouts who are the least elite of any Space Marine chapter. And personally, I would think if you're sending someone to go after something logistically or some kind of VIP, you would be using an elite unit, not your recruits.
Yeah, Purge, you actually have a good point there. Like in real life, your most elite units are typically like reconnaissance and like forward vanguard and disruption type units. So it's kind of funny that with Space Marines it's inverted. But that also being said, like even the weakest Space Marine is like the better than any kind of special forces we can leverage in real life. So keep that in mind too, that even their weakest could beat our best.
And they started with the Primaris. There's certain units now that they're using more for elite operations like that. But if we're going to like Firstborn Marines, it was always the Scout faction that was in charge of it.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's just something that never jived with me. So seeing any faction when they're actually like, no, it's our elites that are doing the elite work, it's like, yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I vibe with that.
I think that even kind of answered the one question we had. What does that say about the Aeldari that some of the most skilled warriors choose the path of the Ranger?
They're the special forces of the Aeldari, pretty much.
Yeah. And they can be like jacks of all trades. Like, yes, they specialize in sniping, but they're probably pretty lethal in close combat too. And they know how to survive out there. I also get lots of vibes like in Lord of the Rings too, where like Aragorn and the Rangers of Ithilien, like they also are elites soldiers of Gondor, right? They're the specialists, they're the, you know, the special forces of their, like in their fantasy medieval type setting.
Yeah.
Too. So that's
And would the Rangers be kind of like, even though they are an outcast, would they still be like more loyal to the larger Eldari than like the Corsairs would be?
I would imagine so, personally.
Yeah, like they haven't gone
Yeah.
down kind of that like looting and pillaging and like some of the darker aspects of it, you know? It's more of that solitary, like work on myself. I just don't want to be around people.
Yeah, they do it more for personal reasons than like more than a gripe with the
more
their
of a
craft world or
professional
whatever.
soldier.
Now, do you picture like we kind of called upon that Ranger trope, specifically the Lord of the Rings one? Could we imagine Aeldari Rangers possibly protecting upcoming Xenos planets from harm. Like maybe they've taken like this planet, this minor Xenos is kind of their little thrall race that they're like, yeah, we're gonna just make sure these guys survive. Like,
Depending on the Xeno, like if we're talking humans, no. But if it's some like niche Xeno race that maybe they only have one planet that's in their domain, why not?
yeah, or like maybe they found another race that was like specifically seeded by the old ones that is kind of like, once again, not orcs, but maybe there's another one out there that they're like, well, we share this kind of genetic legacy together of the old ones. I'm just gonna kind of watch over you.
I find it's probably less likely. Again, Eldar are still gonna Eldar. However, again, always the exceptions. I can totally picture, and it kind of ties into our questions about ego and ego death. If there's an Eldar that does kind of reject the standard, like Eldar are better than everything and should exist, and maybe that's what makes them an outcast. They don't jive with like Eldar supremacy, and they're loners because they believe in like the sanctity of all life and like the connection of all creation, and they get really hippie with it. And then someone like that could see themselves as like a protector and guardian of all life, or certain kinds of life, or like ordered life, or whatever principles they choose to assign then from there. But you could I could definitely see that being a rationalization for sure.
Or like the later Rambo movies where he goes to third world countries and becomes like a citizen there, and then something pops off, and then he's got to protect everybody.
Yeah, exactly. But it would be very much be like it would be very unique, but that would jive with the fact that they're an outcast, because they don't really, they think Eldar aren't the supreme race, and they do want to be guardians of all life and that aspect.
Yeah, there's some cool story possibilities here for sure with them.
Well, like I said in the chat, anything's possible except for female space marines.
Hell yeah, Purge. That a boy.
I think there's some more exceptions.
Christian's about to talk.
No.
Okay, good. I thought you were gonna push back on the female Astartes.
No, heck no. I like Custodes and a bunch of other factions, and some other hard rules I think still exist. I'm always the one that I'm always kind of contradicting Mark whenever everything's like a hard rule. I think those hard rules do need to exist, but I think we should dabble in the creative aspect that 40K was always meant to have as well. So there's a balancing act.
Yeah.
It's the duality of the Eldar.
Don't stray too far, Christian. Otherwise, you'll fall down the path of damnation.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And become a heretic.
Feel free to execute me if I ever do.
All right, Purge, any closing thoughts, or we'll get the next guest up? But
another great show, and keep up the great work.
Yeah, thanks. Cool. Thank you for being a Patreon supporter. Appreciate it. And you have a good night. All right, the last person up to the stage is Grimaldus, and we're going to jump into our Corsair section. But before that, hey, how's it going, Grimaldus?
Good. How about you, fellas?
Yeah, living a good life. What spoke to you about this episode?
The whole Path of Exile. I'm pretty sure that everyone can kind of like look into it and find something that they can relate to. So I really like the concept of it. And just Eldar, as different as they are from humanity, this very small subsection of Eldar can make it so relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as much as alien as Eldar are, they're also very, like, obviously the authors are drawing on human experience, and they're very extreme depictions of human experience ultimately. And even with the Path of the Outcasts, like a lot of us have, especially if you're in this hobby, you probably experienced at some point being a misfit and not fitting in with society. And even if not, like, everyone does have like a rogue streak in them at some point where they, maybe went against the rules or thought counterculturally. So again, it speaks to very human experiences, but they superimpose it on like this alien race.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty much hit it right on the button.
Yeah, cool. So the question is, if you are a Corsair leader, how would you maintain the loyalty of your band while also pursuing your personal ambitions? How do you keep a bunch of these people, like we said, who are trying to break the rules, trying to push the envelope? Yeah, you can tell as many funny knock-knock jokes and be as charismatic as you want, but that's only going to get you so far. How do you really keep your fleet together?
Well, it's going to be a combination of those items that you just said. But I think the biggest thing is a fair amount of looting and pillaging, just to make sure that everyone's a little happy. Now, obviously,
Sure.
as you guys had spoke, honor amongst thieves. You have to find the right individuals or whatever that you're going to have to go through and kind of loot. As you guys were talking about the Corsairs with Jax there, the one thing that had come to mind is having like a home, like Tortuga esque um, trading port.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that, how it can't be a stationary object. Otherwise, you're just looking for an orbital bombardment virus bomb. I'm thinking if they hijack like a asteroid, almost orc style, or you could even just take a planet, toss a whole bunch of jet engines on it, and now you have a planet-sized spacecraft that you can just navigate throughout. And if you can find those webways, you're laughing.
Yeah, I kind of think along those lines too. Like, if you've ever played sports growing up, like the best cure for like a bad team is winning, or the best cure for like dysfunction is winning. Once you start winning, it kind of cures all the problems. So I feel like, yeah, if you're a Corsair and you're just like you're winning battles, you're looting places, everyone's getting fed and happy, then you can keep it together for as long as that goes on. And when it stops, you're gonna get mutinied.
Well, I mean, the Imperium had done it for
Yeah.
almost 30,000 years, whatever. So I mean,
Exactly.
they've been rolling with the ball.
Yeah. I like what you said too about kind of just like there's a little bit of a vetting process that the Corsair Lord would have to do. Like you want to make sure that those people haven't gone down the path of damnation when you get them into your Corsair fleet. Like, that's just going to spark trouble down the line. So you want to get that right kind of person. There's an application for sure that has to be applied for, fulfilled.
Yeah. And as you had said, like a very charismatic leader, but someone that knows where to draw said line and still be an authoritative figure, as well as guide everyone else down the path of the Corsair.
Yeah, for sure. And then my other thought on that Tortuga type place, you guys were kind of saying like a mobile type place where that kind of gets its secrecy. But there's tons of places in the galaxy that are just hard to get to, hard to navigate through. Whether you're in a black hole, maybe, I don't know what the fuck that means, but maybe the place is in some type of spot like that where it's just almost impossible to get to unless you know the exact kind of. You go here, left, boop, 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 boop. You know that perfect way to actually get in there.
Yeah, you know the route then. I was going to
Yeah.
mention the same thing, Mark, is like it doesn't necessarily have to be mobile, although that's certainly an option. But if you're stationary, being hidden is just as important. Don't launch your raids right off your back door. Go into deep space, raid, and then come back. Even if it takes you days of travel or taking like multiple warp jumps just to lose any potential tails, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of wild space out there that you can certainly inhabit.
Yeah.
Eldar riding crotalids to jump around?
I don't have to get crazy with it, but
That's more of an Exodite thing.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Cool, Grimaldus. Any closing thoughts or?
Keep it up, boys. This is great. Like everyone else said, if you're not subscribing to Patreon, get on it, boys and girls.
Yeah, let's see if we can get up to 15 episodes a week. Let's see. I think we can do it.
Mark is lost.
I know enough people
on the path of the podcast.
Mark is really going to become a servitor.
Cool. Well, thanks, Grimaldus. All right, boys, we did it. Another fun episode.
I have some two quick closing thoughts.
Please.
Even though we kind of harped a lot on obviously the paths of Outcasts that we know of, like the Corsair, the Ranger. Again, I just want to emphasize that it doesn't have to be one of these three. There are many ways where like your free spirit can express itself as an Eldar. It's just about more of the mentality behind it and getting off the structured path lifestyle. So like we said this earlier in the episode, but I just want to reiterate because again, we're just kind of reinforcing the ones that we talked about, that there could be other ones, and to like expand your mind and think about other ways that, an outcast can be expressed. And they also can be non-combat, right? Like, of course, 40K is going to dive more deeply in the lore of warriors and soldiers because that's what the game is about. But there's also like a civilian life to this as well, and what that could look like, what rebelling in a peaceful way might be for an Eldar.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to just bring up too, I was just Purge talking there about like the whole special forces thing. There's also a streak, like with the Rangers, there's a streak of like a lot more independence and free thinking in special forces units as well. They're a lot less reliant on standardization like regular military, conventional military units are. So that's a cool kind of like tie into with the Rangers being a little more self-sufficient and a little more free thinking and independent.
Yeah. Maybe my final closing thought / question is, we never really mentioned the webway at all in this episode. And I feel like just due to the nature of Eldar being like fleets, we mentioned the age of the sail, but it transitions to they're just in spaceships. So, I don't think they use it that much, even though they're doing raids much like the Dark Eldar. They're doing it in a much different manner. It's more like space raids and like
real space.
Yeah, real space, ship on ship combat. How often are they really going to planets and invading them? Yeah, it definitely happens, but like they specialize in like ship on ship combat and looting, that kind of stuff. And yeah,
more traditional fighting. Yeah, that's a good point too. And I do think that might tie to like the whole Farseer link, where like the Farseers are really what navigate through the webway. So without Farseers, it's a lot more difficult. You want to rely on a lot more stable routes, and you also don't want to give away those routes, even though you are maybe like off on the Outcast. You're not looking to hurt necessarily your craft world. So like if you're constantly launching raids from known webway entrances, you might attract the wrong kind of attention to them, and it's just not something you'd want to necessarily do. Not that any of that is impossible, but just less likely or very unlikely.
Yeah. The path of the Void Dreamer really helps you navigate and helm those ships and keep you kind of grounded in real space. So that was kind of my closing thought.
Cool.
Well, end notes. Hey, if you like Lorehammer and you want to hear me read homebrew lore, go check out Lorehammer Listen to Lore podcast. I've been open to the idea of maybe listeners just sending in their lore, reading it out, sending it in, maybe do their own little script and then posting it that way, just to help keep getting the stories flowing and out there. So maybe try sending me in something and we'll see what happens with that. If it kind of feels right, I'm open to anything. Lorehammer Listen to Lore podcast. Go check it out.
Sweet. And if you want to further mine and Jordan's path down of damnation on the path of the podcast, come listen to the Star Lores podcast. We discuss everything Star Wars related. Jordan, any thoughts on that?
No, just come check it out. If you like this, I think you'll like the Star Lores podcast as well.
Great.
Yeah, cool. We have one new Patreon in the last few days. His name is Dan. Dan, I love you. You won a trip to Panama.
But you have to pay for your own ticket.
You have to pay for it. But Dan, thank you so much for donating and joining the Patreon. And it definitely helps the show keep going and do as much content as we are doing. So thanks a lot. And we'll see everyone on the next episode. I think next week we're going to be hitting some Primarch stuff. So going to be interesting to see where that goes.
Finally made it.
It's happening, man. I got the next episode is called the Primarch Project, where we're just going to give a context on what that is, give kind of a little snippet of each Primarch before we really dive into them.
Yeah. Sick. Yeah, that's the whole reason I wanted to be on this podcast. Once we're done the Primarchs, I'm quitting. So this is your 9 weeks notice.
Perfect. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next episode. Adios.
Peace.